Aloha, and welcome to this webcast. We're going to guide you through the SBA Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. I'm seeing a lot of people putting in the chat and saying hello, and it's wonderful to see some familiar faces or familiar names there, and some new names as well. So I'm going to guide you through some of the housekeeping for this event. First, my name is Annette Lynch. I'm from Maui Economic Development Board, and I'm happy to be part of an organization being able to put this webcast through. We've already got 473 registers showing how important this topic is to small businesses, not only on Maui, but across the United States. We have people registered for this webcast that are across the whole country. So welcome to this portal. Now we've got the chat going on across the left, which is great. If you want to ask a specific question, down here on the left, hopefully my finger's pointing at the right point, there's ask a question. So please use that for asking any questions. And there's also some polls there. So when you click on the tab, it'll come up with some polls. And right now, if you could go to the polls and go to the third one specifically, and we'd love to know what your current organization entity is. What's your legal entity? If you can fill out that poll, that'll be useful information for our speakers who I'll be introducing shortly. So I'll give you a bit of time to fill that one out, particularly the third poll. You can see the votes coming in. I'll just mute some of our other speakers. I see we've got an echo, so that could be the cause of the echo there. Hopefully that's better. So we've got the voters. We've got a bit of a balance there, predominantly LLC, a couple of sole proprietors, some S Corp, and a couple of C Corp. So keep filling those out as we get going here. We're just past the 1 p.m. hour. And as I've said, we originally put this webcast out to help the County of Maui, our small businesses, to overcome the current challenges with COVID-19. And we realize there's a greater audience beyond this, but we have the Mayor of the County of Maui has a few words for everyone here. And so I'm going to put you onto a brief recorded message from Mayor Michael Victorino.
Aloha to our Maui money businesses. You are the backbone of our economy, and I realize how hard you've been hit by this COVID-19 virus. Congress continues to pass legislation to help bring much needed support from our federal agencies. I would like to introduce the MEDB Business Development Director, Gerry Smith, and Hawaii SBDC Maui Center Director, Wayne Wong. They will be walking our businesses through the application process. They are here to guide you to the paperwork and the submission. Best wishes to all our business owners and your employee ohana. Together, we will get through this.
So, my name is Gerry Smith. I am the Director of Business Development for the Maui Economic Development Board. And I'm sorry that I'm talking to you today under the situation as it is, but we're doing what we can to try to assist the local businesses in every way that we can. And when we found out about this economic injury disaster loan, we thought there's going to be a lot of people here that want to apply for that. And so we were going to give them every assistance that we can to step through that. My name is Gerry Smith, Director of Business Development for Maui Economic Development Board. Wayne, this is Wayne Wong, my colleague over at the Small Business Development Center. Wayne, can you introduce yourself real quick?
Sure.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. My name is Wayne Wong, Hawaii Small Business Development Center. We are SBA's partner in terms of helping people get their applications through. We're not the ones that take the applications, but we can provide technical assistance.
Okay. So what we're going to do is, and the way the SBA is taking these applications has changed a couple of times. And so what we thought it best to do was to show you the forms that you're going to need to know the information from, and then show you how to go online and actually fill this out. So what you're looking at here is actually the splash page for applying for the Economic Injury Disaster Assistance Loan. This is the first place you get to when you do your application, and it's kind of like, I don't know if you've ever used a tax program like TurboTax, but it kind of steps you through the different stages along the way. So let's give you a little bit of background on the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. So next slide, please. So it's there to help businesses who are suffering financial losses due to the impact of COVID-19. And the SBA will give a loan for up to $2 million. The program is open now. You can go online. You could go online last week and apply. Farmers and ag producers do not qualify for this, although aquaculture does. There's no cost to apply for this program. This is slightly different than some SBA programs in that the money comes straight from the U.S. Treasury. They don't act as a guarantor and you would make an application at a bank. The loans can be used to pay your fixed debts, payroll, other bills that you can't pay because the decrease in your business's revenue because of this COVID impact. Interest rates are fairly low, 3.75% for businesses, 2.75% for nonprofits, which answers a question I saw earlier, whether nonprofits qualify for this. Yes, they do. Collateral is going to be required for things that are over 25K. The max is 2 million. The loans can go up to 30 years, so it stretches the payment out over a long period of time and reduces the payment. And there's a 1-year deferment, which means you don't have to make payments on it starting until a year from now. And the SBA determines the loan size. Wayne, do you have any more information you want to add to the background of this loan program?
Yeah, not so much to the background, but a little bit of context. So there might be a lot of confusion over a law that got passed on Friday, which is the CARES Act, or what's known as the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. And that speaks a little bit about this disaster loan, but it also speaks a lot about another loan that's available or will be available called the Paycheck Protection Program. Pretty much covers the same kinds of expenses. However, and a lot of the qualifying things are the same, but the real difference is that's a SBA 7A loan. So the qualifications and the amounts are a little bit different. It's up to $10 million. There's a bunch of stuff in there that has a forgiveness clause in it, meaning, you get the money and then if you show it's spent the right way, part of the loan will be forgiven. Just to be clear, today we're only talking about the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. And so when you hear about unemployment benefits and different things like that, that's not covered by this particular product.
That's not to say that we won't cover them, though. So if there is something that falls outside of the realm of the EIDL, Economic Injury Disaster Loan, then please post a question and we'll research it for you. Let's go to the next slide there. And the question is, who qualifies for this? Well, you have to be officially registered and you have to be doing business legally under federal and state laws. And that means filing taxes, GET, that kind of thing. You're in compliance. You have to be in business for over 1 year. And the size has to meet SBA small business criteria size requirements. And you have to certify that. And there's a way to do that online. It's not that tough, but there's very few businesses in Maui that are small, that have more than 500 people. And so most businesses, I think in this case, will be satisfied by the number of employees being, and that you're still small. The owner has to have invested equity in the business, and the owner has to have exhausted other means of liquidating assets. For instance, you can't have a $2 million bank account and then apply for a loan. They would want you to use the money first. The owner needs to demonstrate the ability to repay, and there are certain certifications that you have to check. For instance, you have to be current on child support. There's some certifications about criminal offenses, and there's also a certification about being a U.S. citizen. So that was a question that came up, and I wanted to address that. So that's who qualifies. Wayne, do you have any clarifying points on that? Did I hit everything on that?
You pretty much hit everything. What's nice about this is when we say certification, it's a self-certification. So you just have to certify yourself to say yes. Right. And it's all covered in the very first screen that you'll get in the application process. So it's pretty painless. Okay.
So let's talk about what forms you need to have, or what forms you need to apply for this. How do you apply? Well, there's a website right there, and there's also a link at the center of the bottom of your screen there that says SBA EIDL online form. That's the same link, and that will take you to the place where you would actually go through the application process. Now, there have been, as far as I can tell, 3 iterations of how this worked. At first, there was an online system where you would go fill out your forms online and submit them. I believe the system was overwhelmed almost immediately. And so then they went to another technique where in order to apply, you would fill out the forms that are listed on your screen right there, the SBA forms, the certification, the IRS forms, all those forms there. And then you would upload them. And so when I woke up this morning, things had changed again. And so now there are forms online. There's a form online. Again, that link will take you there. But it's far different than it was before. And so what my recommendation is here is that you should download the paper forms. And there's a number of reasons to do this. If you download the paper forms and fill them out by hand, one benefit is you'll be able to refer to it 3 weeks later when you don't remember what you applied for, and then you'll have the data there. Number 2, you're probably going to need these forms anyway, or at least the data from these forms. So it's important to do the research now. One of the statements, and we'll go into this a little bit. One of the forms requires you to have multiple years worth of sales numbers. So at least you could begin to fill these forms out. And so when further down the road, 3 weeks down the road, when you get a notification, you'll be prepared for that. Wayne, do you want to add anything?
No, I think you covered that really well.
Okay. So let's talk about what forms are actually required. There's 2, you need to apply. And so there are 2 forms. There's a Form 5 and there's a Form 5C. And then the question is, how do I know which form I want to use? Do I want to use the 5 or do I want to use the 5C? And Wayne, I'm going to let you clear that up a little bit.
Sure. Essentially, the way that the applications are categorized has to do with how you file your IRS federal taxes. And what I mean by that is, if, for instance, probably if you're a sole proprietor and you file your taxes under the personal 1040, then that's pretty straightforward. If you're a corporation and you file corporate returns, that's pretty straightforward. The sort of the one that's not obvious is if you are a LLC and a sole member LLC, you have been told by the IRS that you're a disregarded entity, meaning that you will file your taxes as a sole proprietor, even though legally you are a separate entity. So in that particular case, sole member LLCs would be required to file under 5C, which is the sole proprietor application. And pretty much the other instances for LLC, filing as a partnership, filing as an S Corp, those would all fall under the normal 5.
So what I'm hearing you say, I think, is that if you use your social security number to report your business taxes, you're a sole proprietor or an LLC, you're going to use Form 5C. Otherwise, everybody
Correct.
uses Form 5. Okay?
Correct.
So when you go, this is the form itself. There's a little picture there on the left side of your screen that has the disaster loan application. That's going to have a lot of information that's going to be required and will help you fill out the form that's online. So I suggest, again, downloading the forms. There's a number of places you can get to them. At the end of this, I'm going to give you a link that will give you the paper forms. But do the research first. Do the research, fill this out, and then go online and complete the online application. One of the reasons you want to do that is because you don't want to get halfway through the application and realize you need some research, and then go do the research and you come back and you've been kicked off the system and you're going to have to start all over again. So let me just go over some things that are helpful tips here. When you start filling the online form out, and we're going to do that in a minute, the entries that when it goes from red to green, that means you're okay to proceed. But everything must be green in order for you to proceed. If there's even one red spot, you'll need to complete that before you can move on to the next screen. Just make sure as you're going through this that you're applying for the economic injury loan, if that's the one you truly want to do. We're going to check the questions later, and we're going to do follow-ons. But for the purposes of today, we're just going to talk about the EIDL. The declaration number. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say the other quick thing about filling out these forms when you do the online version, not the paper one, but the online, is make sure that you don't leave any field blank. You know, if it doesn't apply to you, you know, you need to put N/A or none. Just because if you leave something blank, even though it's not a required field, that will be a problem for you. Okay,
that's good advice. The declaration number is EM3431. You're not going to need that, but at one point last week you might have. This is where you're going to enter your business and your personal information, your phone numbers, that sort of thing. And here's another thing that's important. Online, there is a way that every person who owns 20% or greater of your business has to fill this out. So there's a provision online. Again, we're going to get to that in a minute, but there are a lot of things that happen if there are more than one owner of the business, that a lot of the steps will have to be replicated by each individual owner. So say you have an ownership of 50-50, then both owners are going to have to go through this process. And then Wayne, I noticed this morning there's a provision added for a $10,000 advance. I had not seen that before. So let's go to the next slide. Let's talk about this. The next form, basically the next form is certification. And what you're doing here is you're certifying that you're eligible. Now, I can see that there's questions there that ask about your revenues over the last 12 months, and it asks about your cost of goods sold over the last 12 months. Again, this exact form is no longer online, but the data that's in those blocks is going to need to be transferred onto the online. That's why I'm saying that it's really, really helpful to fill out these forms and to download them and fill them out. Can we go back can we go back 2 slides? I just want to show you one thing, because we're going to make these slides available to you. One more slide. One more, sorry. Sorry. I'm looking for the one that has the forms on it. One more, I think. So the ones that are bold here are the ones that you should probably download. The other ones, not exactly required, but the most important ones are the ones that I've hit in bold here. So where were we? We were at the EIDL. Let's just go over that real quick. The supporting documentation on form P019. So this is the thing that certifies that you've been in business for 1 year, that you don't have compensation from a variety of other sources, for instance, insurance, and you're also certifying that you meet the size standard of the SBA, which I believe most of you will. So let's go to the next. Let's go to the next form. This is the request for a transcript of tax return. This form isn't required, but they are. This isn't required right now. It was required last week. But what this form does is it authorizes the SBA to look at your tax returns, and so that's what that form does. Let's jump to the next one. A personal financial statement. This is very helpful to you to have your assets and liabilities listed. Again, if you have assets that are easily liquidated, then they're going to want to know that, and that's where you would put this. You would put this information. There are spots in the application process where you're going to need the information that you've captured on this. Basically, what this form does, it creates a financial snapshot of each owner. And again, this one is one where if you have someone who owns more than 20% of the business, they're going to need to provide this information. And the next one is a schedule of liabilities. And what this one is looking for is a listing of the things that you have fixed debt with. And so, Wayne, we're on form SBA 2022, and this is a schedule of liabilities form. I talked to you earlier about this, and you had a lot of tips about how to fill this form out. Well, I don't know if Wayne can hear me. So what you're going to do here is list things that you have debts with. Your liabilities. So for instance, GMAC, you might have borrowed a car, or you might have bought a vehicle and have a lien against it. This is the kind of thing that this is not where your payroll goes. This is just form 2022, and it helps you understand your schedule of liabilities. The next form is 1368. And again, download these forms, take a look at them. We're going to put a link that makes it available for you at the end of this. So this gives monthly sales figures, and what they're looking for here, or what you need to understand, is what has happened to your business. So typically, let's just take a business that's been in business for 3 years. You would expect to have steady revenue growth, and then with COVID-19, you would expect a rapid plummeting or a cliff, so to speak, a sudden revenue drop off. And this is where they're giving you a place to put that. Now, if you have an accounting system that's in place, then this is a pretty easy draw to just bring it out of the system. Otherwise, you're going to have a little bit of research to do. So those are the forms that are going to help you through this. Wayne, do you have anything you want to add? I know we lost you for a second there.
Yeah, so can you hear me now?
Yeah.
The thing you realize for this loan, you don't actually ask amount. So these, right? How the
You're breaking. You got a headphones or something like that. Do you want to do that? I think he had some points there. You want to try again?
Okay.
Well, I'm gonna Wayne, jump in any time here. For the sake of time, I'm gonna move on a little bit. So let's go through the actual application as it is. And I'm sorry for going into such detail about those forms, but I can't reiterate that the information that's required on those forms is information that you're going to need anyway. And so I suggest downloading the forms, filling them out, and then using them when you go to submit the online. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to actually go through the application process. And so let's go to the actual website. Now I'm going to actually take you to the link that we've provided, and we're going to show you what it looks like. And so here's where you are. And then it says eligible entity verification. The first thing that you have there is you have to identify what size your business is. And so there's a bunch of choices there. Typically, I would say you're an applicant in a business with not more than 500 people. So I'm going to check that. Again, this is the very first page of the application process, and we're going to go through it here. So in this case, I'm going to say I'm a business with not more than 500 employees, but there's a lot of other things there that you could be size-wise. There's a blue link, I believe at the 5th or 6th one down there, that gives you government size standards, and that will help you understand your size, whether you're eligible for this or not, as you must be a small business. So then the next section down below, so you've got one option for choosing what type of entity that you are. And then the second area here is just checking all the following. And so you have to say yes, or you have to say that you're not engaged in illegal activities. All these, I'm not going to read them to you, but you have to say all of those positively before you see the continue button down there in the blue. It won't light up if you don't have them all answered like that. So let's continue to the next page. And so the next page is asking you for your business information. And so I've just made up a little form here. It's Gerry Smith Enterprises, GSK. And you see how the GSE, do you see how it's green to the left of that? If you put in an entry, then it changes from red to green. And that's how you know you've made an acceptable entry. So let's go ahead and put in, for me, I'm not a sole proprietor, so I'm going to put in an EIN number, which looks a little bit like that. And then we're going to go down, and somebody asked earlier if they're a nonprofit organization. Is that legit? Yes, it is if you are a nonprofit, but that's where you would check it. Also, if you're a franchise, let's roll down. So this information is stuff that you have accessible to you. It asks for your gross revenues. It asks for the cost of goods sold. Remember, those numbers came directly off of one of the earlier forms. There's some that aren't green at all or red at all, and those are optional, but I would suggest maybe go ahead and filling those out anyway. And as we head towards the bottom, it's going to ask you some business information, where your business is located, that type of thing, your phone number, fax number, your email address, all this type of thing, what kind of business activity you're in. I chose manufacturing. So manufacturing does not have any other qualified business activities underneath it, but you have to choose something in order to turn it green. So you have to choose something. And then the number of employees, I'll put 3 in there, and you'll see how it changes from red to green. And that's how I get the ability to go to the next screen. If you don't have all of these questions answered, then you're not going to be able to move to the next screen. Wayne, jump in here. What do you have? Anything before we move on? I think we're having, oh, there you go.
Oh no, that's me. I'm having trouble unmuting Wayne.
Okay.
Have you muted yourself, Wayne?
All right. So let's move on. We're gonna move on. We'll sort this out. The next area here asks about more about your business. And so what it's asking here, do you see at the top where it says, is your business owned by a business entity? What they're asking for there is whether you have a parent company. I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but if you click yes, then you'll see that it expands. So there's more information available. So it moves depending on your answers. So for me, I'm going to say no. My business isn't owned by a business entity. I just am owned by myself. And then I'm going to go down and talk about myself, my name, my phone number, my owner, The ownership percentage here, I have 100% because I own 100% of it. Again, if I had 50%, then somebody else is going to need to help provide more information. Social security number, birth date, address, that sort of thing. And see where it says down at the bottom where it says add an additional owner. That's where anybody who is, and let's not click that, but anybody, if you had a 50-50 ownership, then here's where you would add the second owner. And notice also that one of the ones that's kind of hidden but not really is the U.S. citizen. Unfortunately, this is open only to U.S. citizens, and you're going to have to check. You're going to have to check that box. It doesn't have a green or a red next to it. And so let's move on from here. Let's go to the next page. And this is where the certification comes in. So what it's asking you for basically is, have you had any criminal offenses in conjunction with any of these items that are listed here? Are you debarred from doing business with the federal government? All of these answers are very straightforward, and I'm fairly certain that you would want to answer no to all of them, or at least consider that. Down below here, there's a blue section. I'm going to ask that you don't put my name in here because I can't have 400 people apply put this. But if somebody helps you fill this form out, then you would want them authorized to share that information with the SBA, and that's what this does. And then the last little bit down there at the bottom, it says, I would like to be considered for an advance of up to $10,000. That's brand new. So that is something that we didn't have any experience with on last week, but I see this is up and running as of now. So that's how you apply. Now that's not to say that they're doing this to simplify the application process. And you would certify under penalty of perjury that you are in compliance with all those above, but we certainly don't want to click next on this because we made up all that information. So further down the road, a loan officer may contact you and say, we need you to fill out a form 413. I would much prefer you to have it ready to submit to them now than to wait for them to reach out for you and then for you to process this. So I'm going to give you my final thoughts, and then we're gonna look at the questions. I will say that as I looked at the polls, the number of people who are sole proprietors were about a quarter of the people. So it's a lot easier for 25% of you who are on this call than it will be if you have an LLC that's not a disregarded entity or a corporation. So some final thoughts: download the forms and fill them out. I realize that on Friday, the way to apply for one of these is different than the way it is on Monday morning, but I still recommend that you download the forms and fill them out, because then you've got the information right in front of your face, and not something that you have to go do research for and interrupt the application process. Make sure the right people participate in this. There's anybody who owns more than 20% needs to participate in this, and I think we went back and we looked at the area where you would add that. Be consistent. Carefully review everything before you're submitting. Make sure that the owners are correct. Make sure that the percentages are correct. Make sure that if you say you've been in business for 3 years, that you can provide 3 years of financial data, that kind of thing. Unfortunately, we've lost Wayne, so I'm not sure how much, whether he'll be rejoining us or not. I hope he does. Let me just do one more slide here and give you my contact info, and then there's Wayne's contact info there. Oh yeah, I don't think you. I just happened to notice a question going by. When I know 2 people who have submitted these things, they did it way A and way B. I don't know anybody who's done way C, which is the way I'm showing you today, but they did not receive any notification in their email. They did not get a congratulations, you've successfully applied. So don't expect that right away. I think that Wayne said that there is going to be an email, and I think you're going to get it shortly after you reply, but it might not be, it might be 3 to 5 days, something like that. So.
Hey, Gerry.
Yeah.
Hey, I've seen a few questions come in that people have already applied, and they're curious now that it's a new system, do they have to reapply?
I don't have the answer to that. I wish I wish Wayne was still on the call, because he sat through a call this morning. I don't think that you should reapply unless given direction. And so this is the first webcast that we've done on this, but we want to follow it up with others, and we want to look at the questions, and we want to make sure we're answering the questions that you guys have. So how we're going to do that, I haven't exactly figured out yet. But should we take a look at some of these questions?
Yeah, let's start at the top. We've got 7 votes for the top question, so it sounds like people want to know.
Yeah, so no, I'm not going to address the CARES Act, because that is so fresh that I don't have the research done yet. And so, but that is the next thing it seems to me that that's the next thing that we're going to have to do one of these webinars on. And so here's the next question, which is 5 votes, is according to the news, the government will pay off the loan balance so long as the companies do not lay off workers or retire ones. I think that refers to a different program. That does not refer to the EIDL. Again, we're going to follow this up. I saw Senator Schatz send had a very comprehensive sort of 2-pager that he put together that talked about future items that are coming out, and we are certainly going to address that. Forgivable loan, again, this isn't that program. Here's this one. So somebody wrote, how many months worth of expenses should be applied for? And that is interesting, because you don't actually, we've just walked through that entire process, and nowhere did you notice that it said anything about loan amount. And that's because the SBA will determine the amount of the loan, not the applicant. And so that's why that Schedule 2022 is really important, because it gives you a place to list all of the places that you owe money to. For instance, I owe money to GMAC for the purchase of a van that I bought for delivering in my business. I owe $5,000 on it, GMAC holds a lien on it. That's the kind of thing they want to know. What are your monthly expenses that you have fixed debt for? So the answer to how many worth of expenses should be for is you don't apply for an amount. Here's one. On the financial statement, should I list, oops, it jumped. On the financial statement, should I list all cash on hand, both personal and business? Is there a look back period for spending your finances? So again, that's something that's going to be determined by the SBA. They're going to approve certain expenditures and not other expenditures. And again, we're focusing on the EIDL for today, but I can easily see that we're going to do something like this for the CARES Act as well. If you've applied for an SBA EIDL loan, does that interfere with or applying for the CARES fund? That's a question, and I'm going to get the answer to that because when we put this together, the CARES Act had not passed yet, and so what we want to do is we're going to try to put a web page together that's as comprehensive as possible, and keep it updated because like I mentioned earlier. This is a very fluid situation, and the SBA's changed this 3 times, and so it's something that could change again in the future. Does the SBA work for businesses with leased employees? So does that mean like a 1099 employee? Certainly they do. I don't see a difference between owning a small business with leased employees and owning a small business, because this is to cover your fixed debts. This is to cover your the mortgage payment on the business, the payment on the vehicle, that kind of stuff. Annette, I don't know if we can. Is there a way maybe we can get Wayne back in here?
Can you hear me now?
Oh, perfect.
All right.
Perfect. So Wayne, I've just been blathering on here for a while, and I want to get some feedback from you. What of all the things that you've been watching and not commenting on, what do you have? What information do you have?
Yeah, I think the main thing is a lot of the questions that are coming in are related to unemployment. It's related to independent contractors being able to get unemployment. So these are all things that were in a previous package, which is like HR 4616 or something like that. And the CARES Act, which again was passed just on Friday. So we talked about another loan product, which was the Payroll Protection Act, and that one is the one that deals with a lot of these other things in terms of payroll. The unemployment stuff is all new stuff that, because of the way unemployment is handled, which means it's not done from a centralized federal agency, it's done actually through each of the states. That process is supposed to be being vetted right now in terms of how are they going to take applications and things like that. So that is supposed to come by this Friday, and that will probably be through the Workforce Development Office in terms of how to apply. So we can gather up all of that stuff, but anything that's not economic injury disaster loan is still waiting for procedures to show up. So if you look at Senator Schatz's website, it's a really good overview of what's going to be offered, but there's not really processes in place yet.
Right. Here's an interesting question, Wayne. We have to exhaust our savings and or retirement funds, and so the question is, do we have to spend all of our own money before we're eligible for the federal government money? And I would say the one thing that I remember from reading all this documentation is that it is easily accessible. So a savings account and or retirement funds are completely different things.
Correct. Yep, and that's a good distinction. Okay. So a savings account is clearly considered easily liquidated, and you would have to, use that first. A retirement account, because there are limits on how to get it out. There's limits in terms of the taxation and everything else on it. That's sort of out of the realm of assets that are easily liquidated.
Okay. Here's one. Hi, my name is Luisa. I am a small business owner and wholesale store. I warehouse everything at my home and work from my home office. Should I submit both forms, 5 and 5C? And I would say that has nothing to do with where your business is, or it's how you filed your taxes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So the secret is that you can go look at the taxes that you filed last time and see how you filed it. And if you have an EIN, which typically starts with 2 numbers and then a dash and then I believe another 8, is it? Then that's different than a social security number, which is 3 numbers, 2 numbers, and 4 numbers. And so the way you filed your taxes is the way you answer that question.
And then you can have an EIN and file with your social security number, right? So again, we talked about the case of sole member LLC. You have an EIN because you might be an employer and so on and so forth, but you still are reporting your federal taxes under your personal return. So you would file as a sole proprietor, even though, you know, essentially you are a LLC, right?
So Wayne, you weren't on when somebody asked the question if I applied already using either Technique A, which was the online form, Technique B, which was taking all of the forms, filling them out, and then uploading them to the site, and now the third option, which is a different online system. Does that person that's already applied, should they reapply?
So the answer we got from the SBA is not until this week is done. In other words, they recognize that some of the previous ways that you applied, you never got a confirmation.
That's right.
And they're saying that things came in and we are definitely going to contact everybody that has an application in by the end of this week. So so I would say wait till the end of this week. If you have not heard anything, reapply. Otherwise, you should be getting something, but they have recognized that previous to this, yes, you had no confirmation.
So Wayne, this morning when I was going through the online process, I noticed that. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. When I was going through that process this morning, somebody sent me the question, and I gotta go back and read it. Oh, they asked about the $10,000 that was not on there last week, and then this morning I was surprised to see that would you like to apply for a $10,000 advance?
Right.
Did they talk about that on the call today?
They didn't specifically talk about that, but that is what got signed into law on Friday under the CARES Act. Okay. So even though the disaster loan had been already out there taking applications, the CARES Act added this extra thing, which is a $10,000 advance that you can get. And what's kind of cool about it is, so somebody made the case, hey, you know, by the time we get through all this paperwork, these people will be out of business already. And so they added this advance provision, which literally is a grant. So you apply, and as long as everything looks good, you qualify, and they are willing to start looking at your processes. If you apply for the advance as well, you will get $10,000 direct deposit to you within 3 working days. And then in the event that they eventually turn your loan down, you don't have to pay the $10,000 back. It's somewhat crazy, and I mean it's awesome, and so that's why we're telling everybody, hey, apply, put in your best guess and everything else, so at least they will look into your application because you have all the right qualifications and so on. And then within 3 days of your application being accepted, you can get this advance if you ask for it. Then the application process will continue, and if you get a loan, then the $10,000 is an advance to you out of what they finally grant you or award you. However, if you don't get the loan, you actually don't pay the $10,000 back.
Okay.
And that was just signed
Wayne,
Friday.
Wayne, there was a question about leased employees versus non-leased employees. Is there a restriction for leased employees? And when I say leased employees, I think I'm talking about 1099s. I mean, I think that's what they're talking about. If you have a business with 1099s, is there any reason why you can't apply for an EIDL?
No. All you can still apply for a disaster loan because contractors, they basically are treated like vendors, right? So they still are the cost of you doing business. What you don't qualify for is they're not part of your payroll. So losses that are computed because of loss of payroll is not there. However, they are treated as vendors. So just like you use some other required service, the gas company or utilities or something like that, those all factor in. So the cost factors in. Where it gets a little bit weird is you don't get to take, you don't get to give relief to them like you can with employees in terms of unemployment benefits, in terms of things like that. You know, they're a company in themselves and they should be applying for the disaster loan under their own company.
And so here's a question that says, is the $10,000 SBA? Yes, it is. I don't know, Annette, if you can go to the very bottom of the third, I believe the final form, there's a we can show again where that box is that you would check, and it's the very bottom. Yeah, it's not on the, it's on the, it's when you were actually filling the forms out.
Yeah, so there's a box that
place,
says you want an advance.
Yeah, right. And then you put
and
your
when you,
checking
and when you look at that
number,
advance,
ABA.
Yep. So when you look at that advance page,
ahead.
actually it's only asking you for your bank direct deposit information. That's the only additional information you add.
Okay. Can you repeat the part of the advance and paying back?
Sure. So the concept is that they want to get you money immediately. So when you apply and your application is accepted, right? So they could reject your application without even vetting it at all, and the advance would not apply. But if your application is accepted, and if you ask for this advance, they will advance you $10,000, which becomes an advance for when the loan gets actually approved. So it'll be part of the loan amount. But what's interesting is if you don't get the loan, in other words, you were applied, accepted, but then they decided not to give you a loan, the $10,000 is not to be paid back.
Here's a really interesting one. It says, when filling the form, when it asks for other income and other liabilities, as an LLC with a sole member, do I need to provide my personal assets and liabilities, such as if I own a property and I'm losing out on rent, or if I have loans that are personal, do these get included in the forms as well? So answer number one is that would go on the 413D, I believe, is your personal assets and liabilities.
Right.
So you would need to do that. But what's interesting to me here is that if you own a property and are losing out on rent, I believe there's another program that you can apply for. Wayne, are you for you? I know this is really taking a stretch, but is that true? Is there another program that a person who's a landlord and is losing out on rent can apply for? I'm pretty sure I saw that somewhere. I'll look that up.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that, you know, we're kind of talking just obliquely about the CARES Act, and the CARES Act, I mean, it's like 800 pages. So we're picking
Yeah, I know.
out sort of the small business pieces of it. So there's a lot in there for healthcare and medical care and other things like that that I'm not that, conversant on. So we would
Right.
have to look that one up.
But we will be.
So
I still think that there's go ahead.
So I know there are provisions about providing landlords relief because they're not, at least temporarily, they're not allowed to evict anyone. But that was pretty much restricted to residential. So as far as commercial, I don't believe I've seen anything, but I'm not completely positive because again, I haven't, really gotten into all 800 pages of the Friday Act.
Right. Well, you had the weekend, Wayne. So here's another. It says, please answer question regarding leased employees, as in those managed through a payroll service. I don't think employees in a payroll service. I mean, if you use a payroll service to pay your employees, that doesn't change the fact that your part of your expenses are employees. So
yeah. So again,
that question's been
right. So I think what they're talking about is there are, sort of contingency staffing agencies now that if you need somebody, rather than they provide it to you and then you hire the people as independent contractors, they actually hire them as employees, and then they as a vendor will supply you the person. And they work in your company just like you hired them, but you're paying a vendor to take care of all of their HR and everything else. So even though they're called leased employees, the best way to look at them is they are not employees at all to you. So anytime they talk about what you can do for payroll and employees, they don't apply because they're not on your payroll and they're not employees. They're employees of the vendor that you're using that are leasing them to you.
Well,
so it is part of your expenses.
Right. We're bumping up on 2 o'clock. Annette, you wanna show some links up there, some helpful links for folks. What if they want a copy of the paper forms, or what if they want a copy of this? I'd be happy to email this PowerPoint presentation to anybody who wants it.
Yeah, the only caution I would have about the link to the paper forms is when I go back to the links prior to this morning, most of them are gone. So we may have to have a local source for where are the paper documents.
Right.
Hey, Gerry, Wayne, we're going to set up MEDB.org, and we'll set up a page. It'll be apparent from our homepage with links and updates and any sort of follow-up webcasts that we're going to be doing. Plus, we'll be sure to send an email to everyone that's registered for this webcast with some of those vital links that are active now.
That's marvelous.
I just want to say I'm sorry that I'm talking to you in times like this, but I think that we're going to get through this, and all we need to do is help each other, and that's what we're doing here. Is we're looking out as best we can. And if you have any questions, my number's on the screen. You can give me a call.
Yeah, and ditto here. I mean, my number's up there as well. The thing I would tell people to think about is that we will get through this thing. This is much different than a real recession where not only is it bad, but it's going to take a long recovery. This will be bad, but the good news is as we pull out of it, the recovery will be much faster than a standard recession. And I'm very, very enthused by the fact that under the CARES Act and under this Disaster Loan Act, that one of the priorities is get the money out there fast to keep you going, right? And then basically when it comes back, which should be within this same year, you're well positioned to do that. And the changes they're making for unemployment, the changes they're making to try to keep allow you to keep people employed, because they totally understand that that's going to be a part of the recovery of this. So please take advantage of this. With this new streamlined version, I think the applications will be much better. I cannot understand how they're going to do the $10,000 advance, but it's awesome. They're promising it, so let's take advantage of it.
Okay. Annette, any final closing thoughts?
Just we've had questions. There are a lot of questions that we couldn't get round to, and thanks so much to everyone for participating.
Not, then I guess we're going to sign off. And I just want to reassure people that we're going to look at your questions, and we're going to look at the CARES Act, and I'm pretty sure we're going to do this again. So stay tuned.